With the new year approaching, my boyfriend Thaddeus suddenly vanished. I searched everywhere for him, but all I found was a blank check and an envelope. The letter said he was off to marry a wealthy princess and advised me not to show up again after cashing the check. It told me to recognize my place and not overestimate myself. What does that even mean? What exactly is my place? I just can't shake the feeling that being the eldest princess of the Serafina family makes me unworthy of the titles you use. I took a quick glance at the handwriting on the envelope, and it really was my boyfriend's. It felt a bit off. Ever since I started dating Thaddeus, we hardly ever argued. We haven't even exchanged harsh words, so why would he suddenly want to break up with me? And the way he said it was so cold. I quickly tucked the envelope away and dashed to the club Thaddeus usually goes to. I had his black card in hand, but to my surprise, I was stopped at the door. Sorry, this is a private club, and we don't allow outsiders. I looked up at the tall man in black, his fingers cracking ominously. Are you really going to stop me? It seemed like the other person had already predicted my reaction and was completely unfazed. Serafina, please go back. Thaddeus doesn't want to see you. Before I could even respond, Thaddeus's familiar voice came from behind. As a parting gift, you'll receive a blank check, but you need to watch your words. Got it? The man in front of me felt both familiar and unfamiliar, and it left me a bit confused. Even though I haven't known Thaddeus for long, my feelings for him are genuine. Just last night, he went out of his way to set up an incredible fireworks show for me. In that moment, I have to admit, I was truly touched. We stood by the hotel's big windows, watching the beautiful fireworks he arranged, wrapped in each other's arms, sharing kisses. The next day when I woke up, my boyfriend was gone. I had been thinking about bringing him home to celebrate the new year together, but everything that happened felt like it was just a dream. Thaddeus, have you been going through something lately? I wanted to hold his hand, but he pulled away. If you're really facing any troubles, just tell me. I'll help you work through it. Don't keep joking about breaking up, okay? This is the first time I've spoken to someone in such a pleading tone. Right after I said that, he gave me a heavy look, full of disdain. Just you? He noticed my nearly pale work uniform and couldn't help but laugh. You found me this job, so how can you help me? Just bring the check over and get out of my sight. Sure, Thaddeus helped me get this job, but I'm not interested in going back to my family's public company. Thaddeus, I mean it, I really can help you if you just tell me what's going on. I'm putting myself out there because I genuinely don't want to lose you. But Thaddeus didn't even glance in my direction this time. Someone beside him spoke up for him. I recognized that person, Orion, the HR manager and Thaddeus's right-hand man. Serafina, it seems you still don't understand the gap between you and Thaddeus. As he said this, he slowly walked closer to me. Thaddeus only gave you a blank check because you've been by his side for so long. Don't be so full of yourself. You actually think you matter. If Orion had said this at another time, I would have snapped back. But now, I'm holding back. I turned to Thaddeus, who has his back to me. Thaddeus, do you remember what you told me before? You said that no matter what happens, nothing should come between us. Have you really forgotten that? I almost shouted the last sentence. Thaddeus flinched a little when he heard it, but he still didn't turn around. Serafina, let's go. Take the money and start a new life somewhere else. I added, and those things I told you before, just forget them, because they were all lies. Once I said that, I felt deflated, like a balloon that had lost all its air. Before long, Orion started pushing me out. Serafina, you need to go outside. I couldn't fight back. I could only shout at him. Thaddeus, I'm begging you, believe me, I can really help you. Trust you? Serafina, be content. You had a relationship with Thaddeus, and that's more than what others could dream of for a lifetime. If I were you, I'd be so happy I'd wake up laughing from my dreams as Orion's mocking laughter echoed. I was pushed out of the club. Just as the door closed, Thaddeus didn't tell me why we were breaking up. After I left the club, I planned to come clean about who I really am. But as soon as I picked up my phone, another message came in. It said I was fired from my job. It looked like this time he really wanted to cut all ties. Not long after, Orion from HR tagged me in the company chat, insisting that I come in today to process my resignation. I quietly replied with a thumbs up emoji. 10 minutes later, I found myself standing at the company entrance again. Looking up at the place where I once worked filled me with a wave of emotions. Back then, I was just an ordinary employee, but thanks to Thaddeus's support, everyone treated me with such kindness. The news about the breakup is all over the office. I bet everyone is just waiting to laugh at me. Sure enough, as soon as I stepped out of the elevator, I could hear the whispers starting. See? I told you, someone who climbs the ranks using their looks will eventually be replaced. Exactly, look at her background. Did she really think things would get any better? I even heard that Thaddeus gave her $10 million as a settlement, plus a villa. She won't have to worry about anything for a while. With every step I took, I could hear my coworkers whispering behind me. I didn't say anything, I just quietly signed my resignation. Serafina, right? Just as I was about to leave, Orion suddenly grabbed my wrist. What do you think of me? He was grinning at me with a mischievous look, his gaze shifting all over me. I couldn't help but take a few steps back, expressing my disgust clearly. Stay away from me. I don't get what you're saying. With a wicked grin, he pulled the curtains shut and suddenly wrapped his arms around me. Hey, Thaddeus doesn't want you anymore. I can take you instead. As long as you make me comfortable, then. I felt a chill run through me. Suddenly, I heard a shout, and Orion immediately doubled over, clutching his groin in pain as he dropped to his knees. I advised him to head to the hospital quickly, or else it might be game over for the Orion family. After saying that, I kindly pulled back the curtains. The employees outside froze in shock, their jaws dropped. I had heard that the HR manager at the company often flirted with the female employees. My decision to leave felt like a breath of fresh air for everyone at Thaddeus's company. Just as I was about to walk out, I overheard the real reason Thaddeus wanted to break up with me in the elevator. Can you believe it? Thaddeus's fiancée is an heiress from the New York Calliope family. Apparently, she's got a fiery temper, and the most shocking part is her secret hobbies. Rumor has it she enjoys dominating men. Sure, if the Calliope family hadn't been doing so well in New York these past few years, would the Thaddeus family be in such a rush to marry her? Tomorrow at the company annual meeting, Thaddeus is going to officially get engaged to that young lady. I waited until everyone in the elevator left before I finally stepped out, holding on to the door. The Calliope family in New York? So, Thaddeus, is this the reason you've been keeping quiet all along? That's just ridiculous. To me, you think the so-called elite Calliope family is just a minor player. Anyone can step in and take their place if I want. A few minutes later, I called Serafina's dad all the way in New York. Hey, Dad, the Calliope family is bullying your daughter and trying to steal your son-in-law. What are you going to do about it? The Thaddeus Group is a big deal in Chicago. Their annual gala is always a lavish affair. Today marks the engagement of the Thaddeus family and the Calliope family, and almost everyone wealthy and influential in Chicago will be there tonight. Excuse me, miss. Do you have an invitation? As soon as I arrived at the event, the security guard stopped me at the entrance. I'm sorry. I forgot to bring the invitation. Honestly, I had no idea that I needed it to get into the venue. After all the places I've been to my whole life, I've just had to show my face to get in. I'm really sorry, but without the invitation, I can't let you in. Just as I was about to make a call, an unsettling voice came from behind me. Oh, isn't that Serafina? It's freezing out here. Why don't you come inside? Oh wait, I must have mixed things up. You just got dumped by Thaddeus, right? No need to look to know the voice is coming from Orion, Thaddeus's sidekick. At this moment, he's holding a woman who's not wearing much. His walking style is just a bit strange, and I couldn't help but laugh. It seems that kick from yesterday didn't really register with Orion. When he heard that, he didn't get angry. Instead, he just stared at me with this creepy grin. Serafina wants to come in? Beg me, please. If you do, I'll take you inside. However, as a trade, you have to. Before he could finish, there was a sudden yelp. Orion was again clutching himself, on his knees, clearly in pain. I had put all my strength into it this time. Even if we rushed to the hospital now, it would be too late. I strode over, looking down at him. Do you know why dogs will always be dogs? It just can't help but stick to its bad habits. After saying that, I squatted down and rummaged through his pockets for a while until I finally found the invitation. I handed the invitation to the security guard who had blocked my way earlier, not saying much. Here's the invitation, so can I get in now? Before the guard could react, I picked up my pace and waltzed right into the venue. To be honest, the Thaddeus family has quite a bit of power in Chicago. Just their reception hall can hold thousands of people. It's clear that they really value this union with the Calliope family. But when you compare it to my family, it's nothing impressive. I remember when I turned 18, my father actually rented out the whole bird's nest to throw me a birthday party. When I was with Thaddeus, he often brought up how wealthy his family is. I never liked hearing that, and I would mumble that no amount of money could compare to mine. In those moments, Thaddeus would gently pinch my nose and laugh, saying, okay, our Serafina is the richest princess in the world. He was joking, but there was some truth to it. I really am a princess, and one of the richest in New York, yet he just wouldn't believe it. Serafina, what are you doing here? I was wandering around when I suddenly spotted a familiar figure in the crowd. When Thaddeus saw me, he hurried over with a quick jog. Didn't I already leave you some money? What are you doing here? He gently pulled me into a secluded corner, as if he was worried about being seen by others. I stared at the person in front of me who had said he would always love me, but the words I wanted to say just wouldn't come out. Seeing me silent, Thaddeus looked even more anxious. Hurry up! The further you go, the more you realize this place isn't right for you. With that, it grabbed my hand and headed for the door. The warmth in its grip caught me off guard, and for a moment, it felt like I was back in those happy days. Thaddeus, you've really got some nerve. A sharp reprimand snapped me back to reality. How dare he get tangled up with another woman in front of so many people? I turned around sharply and spotted a woman covered in gold and jewels, looking just like a flashy socialite, right at the center of the hall. From her appearance, she had to be Thaddeus's fiancée, the heiress of the Calliope family, named Calliope. I took a closer look at her. She must weigh over 200 pounds, and even with the thick layer of foundation on her face, it couldn't hide the blemishes on her skin. Is she really the one Thaddeus is meant to marry? Thaddeus, if you don't give me a good reason today, your family won't have it easy. At Calliope's command, the staff suddenly surrounded Thaddeus and me. I opened my mouth to speak, but Thaddeus pulled me back. He looked at me with disgust, as if I were just a college student he funded, feeling like the money I gave wasn't enough and refusing to leave. Sponsoring me? Thinking back to the time I was dating Thaddeus, I never spent a penny of his money. For every gift he gave me, I made sure to return one of similar value. So how come it feels like I'm being accused of being spoiled? Today is the annual meeting for Thaddeus Group, and I see quite a few familiar faces around. The atmosphere has already turned awkward. This girl has no shame at all. Thaddeus clearly gave her a breakup fee, yet she just won't let go. She's the kind of girl who always seeks out rich guys. Now that she's landed one, she probably thinks it's still not enough and looks down on him. That's the Calliope family from New York she's dealing with. What can she possibly compare to them? If they just lift a finger, it could spell disaster for her. The Calliope family? I wouldn't be scared even if 100 of them showed up. Before I could get angry, Calliope strode over to me, looking furious. The college student Thaddeus was seeing before? She doesn't even qualify to hold my shoes. But if she were to kneel and lick my feet now, I might just feel merciful enough to let her go. Her contemptuous words really made everyone around view me worse than before. I glanced at the silent Thaddeus and said coldly, "You broke up with me just to marry someone like her?" As soon as I said that, the whole room fell silent. No one expected me to boldly call out the Calliope family in front of so many people. "Shut up!" Thaddeus stood close to me and slapped me. I didn't flinch, I just took it. Thaddeus looked surprised, as if he couldn't understand why I didn't back away. Still fuming, Calliope pointed a finger at me and shouted, "How dare you call me something like that? You, a woman who relies on her looks, actually have the nerve to speak to me." She continued, "Even if Thaddeus is standing right here, he would only be worthy of shining my shoes. If it weren't for his decent looks, the Thaddeus family wouldn't even be in the same league as the Calliope family." She added, "Thaddeus, if you don't make your little girlfriend reflect on her actions and apologize to me today, forget about any investment from your family." The Calliope family's daughter didn't speak very nicely, but Thaddeus seemed used to it, standing there completely still. I didn't want to engage with her, so I turned to Thaddeus. "Back when we broke up, you left me a letter. In it, you said you couldn't choose between love and marriage. Today, I'm giving you a chance to choose again." I pulled out the contract that lawyer Wang gave me. Thaddeus, if you want love, tear up this contract and come with me. But if you want marriage, then just sign it. After a long pause, Thaddeus trembled as he took the pen from my hand. I'm sorry, Serafina. In the end, Thaddeus signed his name on the contract. Serafina, let's go. We're done here. With that, he turned away quickly, as if he didn't want me to see the tears in his eyes. Thaddeus, did you ever really love me? I shouted at his back. Love? Someone like me isn't really cut out for romance. Being with you was just about how easy you are to manage. I never thought you'd make a scene at the annual meeting. Serafina, don't act so childish in the future. Called immature? Maybe that's spot on. I knew the answer already, yet wanting him to say it in front of so many people before I could let go, that feels kind of childish, doesn't it? Watching Thaddeus walk away, I couldn't help but smile wryly. I hope you find happiness. After saying that, I turned to leave the venue, but I hadn't gone very far when Calliope stopped me. Did I let you go? I stared at her face and couldn't help but take a step back. May I ask if the young lady from the Calliope family has any other business? It's the first time someone my age has dared to speak to me like that. The Calliope family really set a precedent. You've dealt with things with the Thaddeus family, and now it's time to sort out what's between us. I scoffed a little. What exactly do we have between us? Calliope looked around before finally fixing her gaze on me. Today was supposed to be a great day for the marriage between the Calliope family and the Thaddeus family. You've come in as an outsider and thrown everything into chaos. Don't you think this affects you? As she spoke, she glanced at Thaddeus, who was standing to the side, looking uncertain about what to do. I'm in a really bad mood right now. Even though I knew Thaddeus couldn't do anything to help, I kept a calm expression. Why should your bad mood affect me? Maybe my complete indifference pushed Calliope over the edge. Suddenly, she shouted, "Kneel down." Sorry. I gently rubbed my ear and smiled without saying anything. Calliope wouldn't let it go. If you don't bow down and apologize, you're not leaving this door today. I'll be right here, and let's see who dares to help you. Before she could finish, the crowd started to murmur. That woman is something else. Of all the people she could have ticked off, she had to go and mess with the Calliope family in New York. Now she's really in over her head. This is going to be quite a show. The Calliope family has a serious grip on power in New York, way beyond anything we've got here in Little Chicago. Everyone at the event is openly speculating about what's going to happen next. Then out of nowhere, Thaddeus steps up and starts pointing at me, yelling, "I told you, we're done, so why can't you just leave me alone? Don't be so ungrateful. I'm warning you, if you don't leave now, I'm going to take back that 10 million breakup fee." He cursed while making a silly face at me. Just as he was about to drag me to the door, Calliope suddenly shouted, "Stop. Who told her she could leave? Hey, Thaddeus, can't you hear what I'm saying? I told her to kneel and apologize to me." Thaddeus, looking gloomy after being scolded, leaned in and quietly said, "Serafina, I'll hold them off for you. You take the chance to get away. Don't worry about me." I glanced at him, smiled, and continued scrolling on my phone. Seeing that I didn't respond, Calliope started to lose her patience. "I'll count to 3. If you don't kneel, I'll have someone break your legs. 1, 2, wait." Just as she was about to make her move, I slowly lifted my head. "This is the New York Calliope family, right? Your dad's name is Caspian, right?" When I brought up her dad's name so directly, Calliope shuddered a little, but she still tried to act tough. "My dad's name has been on the Forbes list for a while. Anyone can look it up. Don't think that just because you know my dad's name, I'll back off." When I found out Thaddeus's fiancée was part of the New York Calliope family, I had someone look into that family briefly. Over the years, the Calliope family has been doing quite well in the real estate business. But in New York, it's not enough just to have money, you need connections, too. Having a solid background makes someone a trustworthy businessman. Without that, even the wealthiest just come off as rich people. Luckily for the Calliope family, they have the Serafina family backing them up. However, companies like Calliope know that if they step out of line, they could easily be replaced. For the Thaddeus family, who has always wanted to make a name in New York, connecting with the Calliope family is clearly the best opportunity. Just then, Thaddeus shot me a glance. Before I could figure out what was going on, there was a stir at the entrance of the hall. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. I checked the time and a slight smile crept onto my face. I was surprised to see that the representative from the Calliope family was right on time. In the crowd, someone suddenly shouted Caspian, and everyone immediately stood up in unison. A few minutes later, a group of impressive-looking people entered the venue, with Caspian at the front. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Calliope asked, her face filled with confusion as she approached him. Unexpectedly, Caspian raised his hand and slapped his daughter. Everyone there was stunned, except for me standing by. "Dad!" Calliope covered her face, looking at her father in disbelief. "Dad, why did you hit me?" Before she could finish, Caspian struck again without hesitation. In less than a minute, Calliope was caught off guard in front of thousands when her father slapped her twice. "Get on your knees," Caspian shouted loudly. Calliope looked stunned by the blows. "Dad, what did I do wrong?" Seeing that Calliope was still holding on, Caspian looked really disappointed. "I told you to kneel. Do you hear me?" He urged his daughter to kneel while glancing at me out of the corner of his eye. Just as it seemed Caspian was about to lose his temper again, Calliope quickly dropped to her knees. "Dad, please don't hit me. I'll kneel. That's enough." Looking at the handprints on Calliope's face, I felt a surge of pride and stood up confidently. I walked over to the crowd and said slowly, "Wasn't someone just asking me to kneel? What's this? Now you're kneeling?" As soon as I showed up, Calliope jumped to her feet, looking furious. She started to say, but I cleared my throat, and Caspian gave her another slap. This time, it was much harder, and I could even see blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Calliope couldn't help but shout at Caspian, "Dad, she's just a college girl who's being supported. Why are you helping a stranger and not your own daughter?" As soon as she said it, she instantly regretted her words. Caspian straightened his clothes and bowed deeply, almost to the floor. "Serafina, my daughter doesn't understand. Please, show mercy and let it go." Everyone was taken aback by Caspian's demeanor, and Calliope was no exception. "The Serafina family? I've been in New York for so long and I've never heard of them." "Dad, are you sure you've got the right person? None of the 4 major families in New York are named Serafina." No matter how much Calliope pleaded, Caspian wouldn't even glance her way. Even though there isn't anyone named Serafina among the 4 great families of New York, there are powerful figures behind them with the Serafina name. I stood quietly in front of Caspian, and as long as I didn't say anything, he kept his head down. After a moment, I let out a soft sigh. The Calliope family has really developed faster than anyone expected over the years. Just as I finished speaking, Caspian almost stumbled. "Sure, I'll get the group to drop all business in New York right away." I nodded with satisfaction and patted Caspian on the shoulder. "By the way, your daughter mentioned wanting to break my legs before." I could clearly see Caspian shaking after I said that. "Serafina, don't worry. I'll definitely give you a satisfying response." I kept smiling and didn't say anything else. Everything had escalated so quickly that no one understood what had gone on between Caspian and me. One thing was clear, I was now someone the Calliope family couldn't mess with. Calliope was on the ground, feeling utterly hopeless, and nobody dared to help her. After dealing with the situation involving the Calliope father and daughter, I turned my attention to Thaddeus, who was standing there in a daze. "Do you remember what I asked you before?" I called out his name, and Thaddeus clearly froze for a moment. "You remember, right?" I stared at him intently, with a blank expression on my face. "So, do you regret it now?" "Serafina, I waved my hand, not wanting to hear any more. "Thaddeus, I gave you 2 chances, and both times you chose not to be with me." I was planning to introduce my dad to the Thaddeus family during the new year, but he broke up with me before that could happen. The Thaddeus family wanted to expand their business to New York, and it could have been as simple as my saying yes. Unfortunately, now it's all too late. The moment Thaddeus signed that contract, I knew his mind was made up. Even if he were given 100 more chances, he'd definitely choose marriage without a second thought. I don't blame him. After all, everyone has different aspirations. The next day, my performance at the annual meeting quickly made its way to New York. My dad got so mad that he smashed a few $100 million worth of antiques right there. On the phone, I kept trying to calm him down. The Calliope family really caught the brunt of it. My dad unleashed all his anger on them. The business in New York took a big hit, and the local operations got seriously affected. That night, I gained a lot of attention, but nobody mentioned my background. After all, digging into the Serafina family in New York isn't exactly a walk in the park. The day before New Year's Eve, I went ahead and bought my flight tickets to head back to New York for the celebrations. I never expected to get kidnapped on my way to the airport. The one who kidnapped me was Calliope, the daughter of the Calliope family. I heard that after I left that day, Caspian had a bodyguard break his daughter's leg to keep the Calliope family from being removed from the circle. People react to her like they would to a ghost. Serafina, it seems we meet again. The moment the hood was pulled off, I saw that annoying expression again. Calliope, didn't you think about the consequences before tying me up? Calliope limped over to me. Serafina, do you know what this is? My leg's messed up because of you. Do you really think I care about the consequences? I stared at her coldly, unimpressed. Calliope, don't blame others. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for crossing the wrong person. Just as I was figuring out how to get out of this, a familiar voice whispered in my ear, Serafina, are you okay? I turned to see Thaddeus lying on the ground, covered in injuries. It seems like he was already punished by Calliope before I got here. Wow, Thaddeus really is lovesick. Even on the verge of collapse, he's still worried about his little lover. With that, she raised the dagger in her hand and plunged it hard into Thaddeus's thigh. Ah, Calliope, you crazy woman. After stabbing Thaddeus, Calliope licked the blood off her dagger and slowly walked toward me. Serafina, do you think Thaddeus would feel pain if I made a few cuts on your beautiful face? At that moment, Calliope was no longer the lady from the Calliope family. She seemed more like a ruthless demon. Calliope, if you have a problem, come for me. Don't hurt Serafina. I glanced over at Thaddeus and saw that his hands and feet were tied up, leaving him unable to escape. So, I started negotiating with her. Calliope, even if you kill me, it won't change the fact that the Calliope family is in decline. Instead of this, why not make a deal? If you let me go now, I can help the Calliope family rise again, maybe even surpass the 4 major families. I really have that ability, but I'm not sure if Calliope would believe me. The Calliope family? I couldn't care less about that so-called Calliope family. Serafina, you've ruined my life. If it weren't for you, my dad wouldn't have had the heart to break my leg. Calliope isn't wrong. It was me who got Caspian to break her leg. But what I'm doing is actually indirectly saving the Calliope family. If my dad gets involved, it won't just be a simple broken leg. The whole Calliope family could be in deep trouble. But clearly, talking to her about this right now won't help. If I want to survive, I need to come up with a new plan. I quietly called out to Thaddeus while Calliope wasn't paying attention. Hey, are you still alive? Hearing me, Thaddeus slowly opened his eyes. He couldn't move his legs, but for now, that wasn't a big deal. Serafina, I was just, at that moment, I didn't expect Thaddeus to want to explain. I quickly interrupted him. All right, let's talk once we're outside. Suddenly, sirens blared at the entrance. Calliope darted behind me and pressed a knife against my throat. Before long, the entire warehouse was filled with people. Back away! Step back, everyone! Calliope waved her dagger wildly. Her father, Caspian, was right in front of her and shouted, Calliope, do you even know what you're doing? Let Serafina go. But instead of lowering the blade upon seeing her father, Calliope only grew more furious. To her, it was Caspian who ordered her legs to be broken. Daughter, you can't mess up again. Caspian was in tears. Yet, Calliope was clearly blinded by hatred. Stay away from me. Even if I die, I'll take someone down with me. Just when everyone was at a loss, I kicked Calliope's broken leg with all my strength. She cried out in pain, and the dagger slipped from her hand and fell to the ground. Seeing this, I rushed over. But to my surprise, Calliope was quicker than me. She grabbed the dagger the moment she hit the ground. Die! She shouted. The dagger was almost about to pierce my chest when, out of nowhere, a familiar figure stepped in front of me. Serafina, Watch out! Thaddeus used his body to block the stab from Calliope. Blood started to flow from his palm. Everything happened so fast that I didn't even have time to see how Thaddeus managed to escape. He weakly collapsed into my arms the next second. There was a loud bang right next to my ear. A bullet whizzed past me, hitting Calliope squarely in the arm. The police saw this and rushed over to take him down. Thaddeus and I got into the ambulance heading to the hospital. Looking at Thaddeus lying on the stretcher, pale as a ghost, I couldn't help but ask him, "Why did you take that knife from me? Do you realize it was just a centimeter away from your heart? If it had gone even deeper, you wouldn't have made it." Thaddeus managed to give me a faint smile. He said, "At that moment, all I could think about was making sure you were safe." Looking at the man in front of me, still grinning like a fool, my eyes started to feel a bit teary. Right, weren't there some things you wanted to say back then? With fewer people around, go ahead and speak up. As soon as I finished, Thaddeus's expression shifted to serious. He cleared his throat and looked at me with deep intensity. "Serafina, what I meant to say is, can I ask you out again?" I looked down and moved a bit closer. "What did you just say? I didn't catch that." Thaddeus held my hand and shouted, "Serafina, can I ask you out again?" Feeling the warmth in my palm, I nodded vigorously. "I heard it.